Hey, what's up guys? This is Ariel from Mecha, and today I'll be answering a question I was asked recently about what type of tools do I use to build my Gunpla, and what type of tools can I recommend for someone who is starting to get into the hobby, or for those who are in the hobby to advance their experience with building. So I've laid out a couple of my tools on the arena. Why don't we check them out and we could discuss that question right now. Getting a good set of nipper would probably be your first tool to get when you are getting into the Gunpla hobby. Here are some of the nippers I've accumulated over the years. This one being the oldest one, and it's not even a hobby cutter per se or a hobby nipper. It is actually a wire cutter that I got from a hardware store, and what I noticed was the head was like almost similar to the ones I've seen my friends use. So I figured, hey, for that price point, I picked one up and it did a job pretty well. I've no real bad thing to say about like using an alternative to the hobby nipper, so there's an option there. Later on I did upgrade and picked up several of these hobby nippers, and this is something I would recommend for those beginners who are trying to get into the hobby. They're inexpensive and there's many varieties of companies and whatnot that produces this, but this is something that would be traditionally used when you are removing pieces from the gate. In future episodes, I will talk about all these tools and show you how I would use them or how they're properly used. And what I'm using now is this guy here. It's God Hand Nipper. I really like the performance in this a lot better than the hobby, but also it is a higher tier item in regards to price point. The performance, though, I think justifies its price, as well as the build quality is very decent with it. And what separates this from the regular hobby nippers is the fine cut that this thing could do when you're removing the off the gate. So something to look into investing if you are going to advance in the hobby at a later stage. Now over here, this is probably a knife that you'd see. It's almost like a box cutter knife, and this is what I started off with. I didn't know at the time what a hobby knife was, and this was just something easily acquired through the dollar store. Actually, both of these guys are dollar store, and I'll get to that in a second. The cool thing about this one is fairly straightforward to use. You take it out, use to cut it, and when you chip the I guess the pointy part there, you could just break off the piece and it becomes another, sharp edge point. This also comes with excess or extra blades stored in the back, and this guy here is what you use to break that off. What I liked about this one, again, it's just easily accessible, something you could probably find in your office supply and whatnot, but I wouldn't recommend this as your first blade. If you get a chance, try to find yourself a hobby knife. This one here actually got from a dollar store, pretty cheap, and it does the job. So the cool thing about this one, lightweight, could handle like a pencil, so a little bit more precise, and I tend to hold it like this with the blade and thumb, usually cutting it inwards. Something to get used to, and you will get eventually those line cuts here, and just be careful when you are using sharp objects like this. Now, the difference between this and that in regards not just only for the shape itself, but the way you replace the blade is take this off, unscrew it here to loosen up the grip, take that out, and you would replace it with hobby blades. I bought 120 pieces and I've only used a good percentage, maybe 20 of it. And I tend to change it when the top part of the blade tends to get nicked out. It does happen when you are cutting stuff, so be careful with that, but that's something I would probably recommend to start getting used to. And then after that, once you've cut all the pieces out, you might have, and this would just be to smoothen out the rest of the model kit piece that you're working on. To further seal that nice surface on the plastic, you would probably use some of these things like the sanding blocks. This one is pre-cut with various grits. Now with the grits, the higher the number, the finer it is. So the lower the number, the more gritty it is. By that it means more coarse. I usually start with a 600 and work my way to 1,000. And the difference between this guy here and now this paper here, this is just a regular sanding paper. You get this in any hardware store, but it does the exact same thing. This one is a 600. I usually start with a 600, and I've accumulated this up to the grid of like 1,200. This is a lot cheaper, more like I guess surface for your money, whereas this one is pre-packaged, but you get several various grits in a package. So it all just comes down to like what your project is and what you're using it for. Now, I pointed out as well, this guy here, this is a part separator. What this thing does is, say you put two pieces together, and for some reason, inside those two pieces, you mistakenly put a piece or omitted putting a piece, or sometimes maybe put a piece upside down or backwards. And because parts typically are sandwiched together, sometimes you can't get your nail or get your grip to pry open those two pieces. This guy right here would find a crevice like so, and by just twisting it, the handle, hopefully you don't chip out the plastic. Be careful of that. It does happen if the pieces are too tight together. So this one is handy in regards to if you do make mistakes. Probably like not something you would get right off the bat, but something handy to invest in at an early stage, because you will be using that for the duration and your evolution into the hobby. And so once you've acquired those and got a little bit more experience with building your model kit, you obviously want to continue evolving and acquiring various tools to enhance your building experience. In the intermediate to advanced stage, you will be getting into, for example, kit bashing, customizations, and scribing. So I'd probably touch base on that at a later stage, but just to give you an example of what some of those tools would entail, let's start off with, that's a good question. Why don't we start with the pin vices? Okay, so this is a pin vice holder, and what it does is similar to the knife, the hobby knife. It opens up and you could load different types of bits, drill bits, hole making bits, various stuff onto this, and this is like one holder that can do so many things. There's a rotating back I guess handle here, and what you would do is once you load a bit in, you would just go and drill with this, make the hole. This is good for, like, you know, putting, again, pin vices. That means you're putting like a thin rod between two pieces, and you need to make a hole first in order to get the rod in there. This is an example of what that bit or the drill head would look like. Right here. So this end here would connect with the holder and basically would drill into the plastic. Now with scale models, you're working with small items and you'll need tools for that kind of scale. This, if we take this head out, and give you a preview of what makes this very useful. It has different sizes of holder. If I can get this thing. Come on. There we go. To hold different types of bit heads. So this one is a little bit like a more of an open head, and if you look at the other side, this is more suitable for that tiny drill bit head that I just previewed a second ago. So with the larger head, it gives you another option to connect larger bits. So for example, the God Hand hole maker, there's different types of I guess hole sizes in millimeters. So 1 millimeter, 1.5 to 2.53. 3 millimeters is something that's very common for types of pegs that are used in model kits when you're, for example, you know, the hole that would connect your shield or your backpack in. So with this guy here, it would just slot into the connector. So head back in. Good. Go. And there you go. So this particular tool here, the hole making bit head, is there is a into that right there. There's a little needle piece at the tip of the straight edge, and that's what would penetrate the plastic first so that it finds its center, and then you would then rotate and it will stay in that center because that little like needle almost like head would secure that in place. Very useful again for customizing, adding holes, connector for your weapons and whatnot. So something to look into investing as you do more complicated, more complex. And then after that, you would probably like to detail up your kit. That would be involving scribing. So these guys here are the different types of scribers that I have. This is probably my first scriber. It's a Tamiya scriber. And what it is get this almost hook-like blade on the top. And what it does is, with the use of where's my Dymo tape? Here it is. I will add that in a bit, but this is what a Dymo tape looks like. It is actually something similar to what you would find in the material for label makers. Label making machine probably use this guy here, and then you would put your name. But for model kit use, this is what would be the type of guide ruler that you would apply on your plastic. So you would cut this piece. Process would be, if you have a piece, you would draw your line with a pencil or some kind of marker to indicate what type of design you want to go on a piece. You would then cut the Dymo tape, stick it to that. It will adhere to the surface temporarily, and then you would use this. Instead of using a ruler, you would just go and your lines. Okay. So this I've used for my early scribing days, but I find that it has like this V-shape blade, and the line seems to be inconsistent in regards to that, because like the deeper you go, the wider the crevice becomes. Yeah, just open this up just to show you guys what's inside this. Pretty cool, actually. That's how you would replace the blade, and there's extra blades as well in the storage compartment of the hand. Since then, I did, oops, hang on. Okay. There are several other ways to scribe lines by use of like chisels and I guess chisels from companies like MadWorks or BMC, but because of my lack of funds and the availability of this particular tool, I picked up a Krios scriber. Let's see, then properly. Okay, cool. So the Krios scriber is very lightweight. It feels like a pencil, and similar to the Tamiya one we were just looking at, it has a hook-like blade on the top, and that's the similar steps from drawing your line, putting the Dymo tape, and then using this to draw your lines. This is a little bit more consistent because each of the blade is actually a specific millimeter to the width of the crevice you are making. So with this tool, you could use different types of bit heads or scribing heads for it. So this one, for example, oops, is a 7 millimeter head, pretty fat. And what you would do with that is take this guy, take the head out, and replace it. There you go. This is now a set 7 millimeter line when you are doing your run through the scribe panel. Okay, so I will put that for now there, the way so we don't lose it. Okay, other advanced tools would probably be filing. So this is like a different type of file, similar to this, and it's a very coarse file. And the reason why this is not something I would recommend in the beginning is just because this is more for like complex work where you need to sand down really unique, shapes, or you need to get into something a little bit more in the corners and whatnot. So there are various different types of files, and then you would have to, depending on what the project is, might have to attach like one of these paper things to that and then file away. So again, something a little bit more advanced use depending on your project. Lastly, I would talk about, actually, no, not lastly, something in between beginner and intermediate and advanced, and something you'd probably use throughout is a tweezer, a good set of tweezer. I've had this guy for years. Very versatile. I've used this in applying tape, applying stickers. So with tweezers, this is something you would use to hold on to little tiny things like decals or stickers. That would be part of your application process. There are many different types of tweezers, some of them ranging from really pointy stuff like this to a more flatter head, angled ones. It all depends on what the project is and what you will use it for. But typically this one is something I've been using just to grab something, apply to it, be it a tape that I need to cut and then apply without touching it with my finger, so that the oil or whatever on my finger doesn't go to the underside of the stick. Okay, now lastly, on my tools here, probably the saw, hobby saw. So there's this guy and this guy. Pretty straightforward. This is something that you would use to cut plastic pieces. So if I want to chop this clean in half, boom, and use it as like a regular saw. The cool thing about these guys is they're very thin. It's almost like a millimeter in thickness, not even, so it doesn't take off a good chunk of plastic when you are cutting it. So depending on the depth of your plastic, you could use something as narrow as this or something a little bit more wider, give it that extra depth, depending again on what you are cutting. So another thing I want to touch base as well on is the cutting mat. Now, I didn't mention this as a beginner thing because I don't think you will need it right off the bat. You will eventually need it. This, I believe, is your preference. What are you comfortable with? And if you want to protect your surfaces, then yes, I would recommend getting one of these cutting mats. It helps you as well when you are cutting, especially when you're doing more advanced things like cutting panel lines and not panel lines, plot plates and other pieces of materials, be it plastic or stickers or decals or whatever. This is something I would recommend purchasing as well ahead of time before you get too far into the hobby, just so it's part of your initial investment into it. Do we need it for beginners? Probably not. Will you need one? Yes. But yeah, that is pretty much my tools that I could share with you guys. These are just common stuff that I would use for my builds, everything from snap fit to a little bit more complex projects. All right. So hopefully that gave you a little bit more of insight to the type of stuff I use, type of tools I would typically use for my builds, and hopefully answered some of your questions in regards to what I could recommend for beginners and for those wanting to expand a little bit more on their experience and tools of the hobby. So thank you again for tuning in, and just to let you guys know, I do stream Monday, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. Mondays and Wednesdays, 9 p.m. EST, my live builds on Facebook Live, and Saturdays would typically be a featured builder or featured topic show. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button at the end. And if you have any questions, feel free to PM me. Check out my social medias at @AOMecha. That would be for Facebook and Instagram. And if you have any questions or want to be featured in the shows, please feel free to email me as well at aomecha.info@gmail.com. All right, that's it for me tonight, and hopefully that helped inspire you and continue building, guys. Can't wait to see what you guys could do. All right, till next time. See ya.